I was with some priest friends, and as we were sipping a libation, and talking about, in some ways, all that's wrong with the world, one of these wise priests gave me this quote from a Canadian theologian, Bernard Lonergan. It goes like this: the problem with living is that we have to live our lives without having an opportunity to learn how to live our lives. Somehow I like that. Let me say it one more time. The problem with living is that we have to learn to live our lives without having the opportunity to learn how to live our lives. And so as we begin stepping into a new year, part of, I think, what the readings bring to us, and the weather also does its job very well, is the contrast between darkness and gloom and the light of Christ. Whenever God comes into the world, it's always, in the scriptures, seen as a great light. And yet, the readings also talk about, as the first reading does today, kind of the world plunged in darkness, in gloom. The weather persons, I guess I'm supposed to say, call this time sad, seasonal affective disorder. In other words, when we live without a lot of light, especially sunlight, it has a real effect on us, at least emotionally. We become sad, grumpy, crabby, whatever word you want to use. And so it's also not only something we contend with regularly in our weather world. We know that darkness has power over our lives, and sometimes it can almost seem to take our lives over. And that's why today it's important for us to focus on these strangers. We call them kings or magi, astrologers. We don't really know. But something that they can teach us is how to keep walking towards the light in the midst of darkness. That they journeyed to find the mystery of God in this little child at night. Think how difficult that is. And we all have a little experience of occasionally the power goes out, but that's nothing we know compared to, say, what many people in Ukraine are suffering regularly, living hours and hours and hours of a day and a week in darkness, as so many parts of the world have to do. And so the challenge for us as we step into a new year is, how do we learn to walk in the darkness and yet confident that the light of the world has come. And as the Gospel of John says, the light has come into the world, and no darkness can overcome it. And that's what we believe, and that's what sometimes we have to hold on to with all that we have within us. So there's three strategies. How do we keep walking in faith in the darkness that surrounds us? Again, not just weather. Consider, I'll get myself in trouble saying this, but I'll say it, the clown show in Washington this past week, and so many other examples where darkness seems to be so pervasive that we kind of lose sight of the light that has the power to lead us and the power to transform us. So the first strategy is an old biblical one, and it's called remember. Remember. How often we've had the experience of feeling completely overwhelmed, maybe by illness or by a loss or a disappointment. And yet, what we know is somehow, in the past, we've gotten through it. We've gotten through it through the power of faith, through the support of a Christian community. And so sometimes when we're feeling overwhelmed, enveloped by the darkness, we need to remember at other times in our life when there was darkness and yet the light was able to pull us forward, to keep us moving. The second strategy is so much about the gospel that we'll be hearing every Sunday throughout this liturgical year, the Gospel of Matthew. The gospel that promises Emmanuel. God is with us. God is with us. And that's important for us to hang on to, because it's not just about feelings that come and go, but it's also about life convictions that keep us going in faith. And so even in dark times in our life, we need to remember Emmanuel. God is with us. God is there sustaining us, even though His presence may not be so apparent to us, to keep trusting that we are never alone. And the third strategy is to keep leading into the light, to keep trusting and believing what this whole mystery of the Christmas season is all about. The Savior has come. The Savior has been given to us. The light shines in the darkness, and no darkness can overcome that light. So even in the darkest times, we need to hold on to that deep conviction, to remember, even in darkness, Emmanuel, God is with us, and also to remember this great truth of our faith, that the light has come into the world, and no darkness can overcome it. But we can also be instruments of light. We can bring the hope and the love and the care of Christ's love to those who live in darkness.
Thank you for joining us for this celebration of the Mass. This virtual Mass is broadcast to hundreds of people every day of the week. You know, over 100 years ago, the very first celebrations of the Mass took place on the second floor of the Glenview Public House. It's been inconceivable that 100 years later, we would be reaching so many people all over the world through this technology. If you'd like to support the ongoing broadcasts of OLPH's Masses, please go to our website, go to Give Central, and you'd be able to support the ongoing outreach of this virtual ministry. Thank you for your support. Most of all, thank you for joining us in prayer. God bless you.